There's really only one more interval that we're likely to come across when talking about music, and that is the interval of a 13th. And you might be wondering, well, why is 13th the last very commonly used interval, and not a 14th or a 15th? Well, the reason for that is a 14th is really some kind of 7th interval. It's a compound 7th, a major 7th, or a minor 7th, and really we tend to just talk about that relationship as being some kind of 7th relationship, and so you won't really hear someone talking about a 14th chord. Really, they'll be talking about a 7th chord, even though that 7th is a compound interval split over an octave. And a 15th is just 2 octaves. So if you wanted to say, please give me a note a 15th away from this lower note, then really what you're saying is give me a note 2 octaves above. And so those tend to not come up. It's not to say they're not theoretically possible. 14ths and 15ths exist, but we tend to just not talk about them quite so much as we would talk about the 13th. And so what is a 13th? Well, just like all these other compound intervals, it's an octave plus an interval that we already know. And in this case, a 13th is a compound 6th of some kind. So a compound 6th. It could be a major 6th or it could be a minor 6th. And these intervals are quite useful, particularly for use in chords. So we can add a 13th to a chord, and that does give our chord, again, another different, interesting flavour that we can mix in to make our harmony more interesting. We probably should be able to find a 13th relatively easily by just following the ideas that we've already learnt about, really. If we are saying that a 13th is a compound 6th of some kind, then what we're really doing is looking to add an octave to a 6th. And so let's see if we can do that starting on this F. So if I was looking for a 13th above this F, well, the first thing I would do would be to work out what note is an octave above. So that's relatively easy. There's an F, an octave above this lower F, and then we're trying to add a 6th on top of that. So if we have our F, what's a 6th above this F? Well, a 6th, major 6th, say, would be the 6th degree of the F major scale. So if we know our F major scale, it goes like this, and the 6th degree, the 6th step of this scale, is a D. So if we were to play these two notes together, that is our 13th, and in this case it's a major 13th or a compound major 6th. Just like some of these other very big intervals, we tend not to find it in melodies because it's quite a big awkward jump to make. Imagine trying to sing this melody, for example. It's just a very, very big awkward leap, and a singer, for example, would really struggle because most singers actually don't have such a big range that they can easily jump up and down 2 octaves, which is essentially what we're doing when we're getting towards 13ths as an interval. What we do find is people using these intervals as a part of a chord, and it's a useful ingredient that we can add in. So what would we have in a 13th chord? The symbol that we might see for a 13th chord, say we're going to build a chord on F, is we might see F13. And if we see that chord symbol, sometimes it's written in a box like this, it's telling us that we are expected to build a chord to represent that symbol that uses a certain number of ingredients. And one of the ingredients that is certain, it must be there, is a 13th. All the other ones are probably actually optional. We'll go and look at how to build harmony, more complicated extended harmony like this in future videos. But to start off with, this is saying this is the range of ingredients you could choose. So you could choose the first, third, fifth, flattened 7th, because this is another flavour of a dominant 7th chord. If you don't know what a dominant 7th chord is, I think I've made a video about that already. This is adding more ingredients in on top of that dominant 7th interval. Again, this is a minor 7th interval, and that's a really key component of this dominant 7th sound. When we get towards a 9th, 11th and a 13th chord, in this case a 13th chord, we're just adding more flavours of notes on top of that. And actually, if we get as far as there, we've added every single step of the scale, going right the way up to 13th. Because if we have a look, say we've got our F major scale, there we are. Now in this case we're just using an E flat because we're working with F, but we've got a flattened 7th instead of the natural 7th that we'd normally find. Let's see just in its most basic form what this would look like. So we've got our F, that's the root of our chord, that's number 1, right at the bottom of the list. Then we've got the 3rd added in, that's the 3rd above. Then we're going to add in our 5th, that's above that. Then we're going to add in our flattened 7th, And so far this is just an F7 chord. So this first bit of the chord is just an F7, and then as we add in more of these extra ingredients, we can start to play around with what we call an extended harmony sound, which is giving us more colours to play with and more elements to the chord. So that's our 7th chord. Let's add in a 9th. Sounds like that. That gives us a bit of an interesting sound. It's kind of a dreamy chord, and we keep adding the notes in. This is the 11th, and this is the 13th. So let's have a listen to all of those notes together. And that is our 13th chord. Now we don't have to always use all of those ingredients, and some composers are very good at working out some interesting combinations of notes for us. I'm just going to have a go and play a few 13th chords of different flavours and see what you think of those.